Welcome to Destination Change, a podcast where we talk recovery, treatment, and more. I'm your host, Angie Fiedler-Sutton, with the National Behavioral Health Association Providers, and I use she, her pronouns. My guest today is Judy Redman. Judy is a deeply respected leader in the field of addiction treatment and education. She has dedicated her life to the betterment of treatment and the advancement of recovery services, working tirelessly to improve systems and support those on the path to healing. She has been a passionate educator at Intercoast Colleges since 2004, where she's mentored and instructed hundreds of students, many of whom have gone on to become leaders in their own right. With more than 2 decades of experience working with SUD treatment facilities, Judy brings deep insight into what it takes to create meaningful, lasting change in individuals and communities alike. Judy also brings her commitment to underserved communities through her work with the Offender Mentor Certification Program, OMCP, in California's prison system, empowering incarcerated individuals to become certified counselors and agents of change. Her passion, leadership, and lifelong dedication make her a true force in the field. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you. I'm so honored to be here, Auntie.
Now, for longtime listeners, my first question is always the same. I always like to hear origin stories, kind of what made you decide to go into this field versus all the other job opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, well, I think that this field chose me. I'm in recovery. I've been in recovery for 27 years. I broken, all that comes with a person that has decimated life through drug addiction and alcohol addiction. I don't want to spill the whole story, but I too was incarcerated. And through my incarceration, I was able to sober up and find that I can live life without drugs and alcohol. And from there, it was just a path of searching and finding the right people to guide me. And that's why I'm so dedicated to education and guidance, because I never did it alone. I always had support through this community. You know, I'm talking about the recovering community, the educational community, the treatment community. So I've worked tirelessly to be a resource for those that are challenged with sobriety, challenged with recovery, because it's not an easy path. But once you're on that path and you're walking with persons who have forged it before you, it's doable. And the outcome is I wouldn't change a thing about my life today, Angie.
Well, that's a powerful story. One of the things I like to ask people who are in recovery themselves, because the answer is different for everybody. What does it mean to you to go through treatment or recovery?
Right. What I learned in recovery, the biggest gift I've been given in recovery is that I have self-efficacy today. I love myself today. And, you know, I never dreamt that was possible. And I don't mean that in a selfish or self-centered way. I just mean that life is a gift, and that, you know, the gift of being able to appreciate, right? And that's what it means to me today is that I can appreciate life, and I can appreciate people, and I can appreciate people's differences. And I can be a support to all walks of life and all different attitudes. You know, so we don't come in with the best attitude, and that's okay, right? As long as we are on a platform of people that can guide us and help us, because I needed help. No, I was a very negative, insecure, shameless person. But today, through learning and education and people that supported me along the path, great mentors, Pete Nielsen from CCAT, right? I've known him for 25 years and we've kind of grown up together, right? So.
Well, for those who are long-term listeners, a reminder that we did interview Pete for episode 2. So if you haven't heard that, please be sure to go back and listen to his. One of the other things we like to talk about, the reason this is called Destination Change is because we think about recovery as a journey, not a destination, that you go all over the places, that it's not a straight line, that you can sometimes get just, distracted, I guess is the best word to use. And there are a lot of barriers in order to move forward. With you working with incarcerated individuals, you obviously have that barrier that you see. But, talk a little bit about kind of what other barriers you see, and also a little bit about why,
Oh my goodness. Yeah, we could spend all day long on the barriers. Yeah. And the biggest barrier that I find with individuals is themselves. And even, people that come to school to be drug and alcohol counselors, oftentimes they haven't done the personal work yet. And the stumble and the fall comes from, this is an inside job, and I say it's an inside job with a lot of support and people and guidance along the way. But you have to do the work and to find out, what happened, what made you think the way that you think. Right? And, so many of us come from adverse childhood experiences, and the importance of knowing that where we come from so that we can build a path to prosperity and enlightenment and acceptance and appreciation and all of those spiritual principles that nobody showed us. We were taught to survive, and we're great survivors, but we weren't taught to hear that inner voice that's within us and to listen to that inner voice. And, the heart song that we get when we're in a community of people that are speaking that language, the phenomena of change, right? And I love, that you're using change because it is a change is a phenomena. And I get emotional, when we're talking about incarcerated individuals or, students that come to intercoast colleges on that path of change. And I'm still changing. 27 years later, I look at myself 6 months ago and say, oh, well, bless her heart. Look at, she was still learning, still. So in early recovery, that being amongst people that understand you and your neurotransmitters and the way that they're working in early recovery and can accept and appreciate and help you along the way without judgment, right? And it's not that I'm better than, I'm more experienced than, right? In this path of recovery. I've just made all those early recovery mistakes in that black and white thinking. And this is the way that it should be, instead of being blessed with knowing this is the way that it is. What's my part in it? How am I going to make it better?
Let's talk a little bit more about your work with incarcerated people. This is going to sound like a stupid question. I by no means believe this myself, but there is a segment of the population that, they did their crime. Why should we help them? So what is your standard response when you hear that from people? Why should we help incarcerated people?
Yeah, well, who better to help incarcerated people than incarcerated people? And I have the blessing that I get to go in and speak with these LWOPs, they're lifers. And so to be able to help the prison system, we're facing crisis when it comes to substance use disorders in the prison systems. So who are they going to listen to more? A counselor that walks in or an inmate that's in recovery themselves and able to show them that recovery is possible behind the wall, right? Mm-hmm. That not only is recovery possible, the purpose of life is possible. And to find joy, as a mentor inside the prison system, despite all the deprivation that they face, that they can find joy and blessings and, appreciation. Right? Who better? So if I get to be a part, witness that, you bet. Anytime they ask me, I'm in there, so.
Well, along those lines, the Offender Mentor Certification Program, how long has that been going?
Right. So there is a movie out. It's called The First 50, and it started in Solano. And I'm not sure how long it's been going, but it has grown from the Solano prison to 7 different prisons throughout the state that is now Options Recovery they just received the new contract for it. So it's a contracted, nobody cares about that, but it's contracted through Options. It's not always been contracted through Options. I think Pete Nielsen for a while at CCAP, or it was KDAC back then, was doing the offender mentor program. So I'm not sure, again, I can't tell you the history of it all, but I know that because it works, because they go in and they mentor the ISIT program, which is the program where people do the recovery process behind the walls, right? The early recovery, and learn about the parallel process. And, so who better than the LWOPs that are there?
Is it any different from like a non-incarcerated style program? I mean, what are the differences?
Yeah. Well, it is different in that the instructors have to go in to the classrooms that are set up. There's nothing online. Everything is face to face. The instructors go in and teach. They go through the same process, as far as certification goes, and testing goes. They have to be tested, and be certified just like somebody on the outside. But the educational piece of it is that instructors have to go to them and be cleared. And
Is it like a group of people, or is it on a one-to-one basis, or does it vary?
oh no, they have classrooms. They
Okay.
have, so there can be, somewhere between 20 and 36 inmates inside a cohort. Each one is called the cohort. And so each prison, through the CDCR system, each prison opened up, like, I think LAC is on its third cohort, right? Solano is on like its 16th, 17th cohort. Yeah, I had the blessing to go in and speak with the women. And I think it was the 7th cohort for the women's prison, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they're going to be certified drug and alcohol counselors inside the prisons.
You mentioned Intercoast, and that's education as well. So let's kind of switch over to that.
Yes,
Our audience is wide and varied, from everybody who has been in the industry as long as you have to people who are just starting out. So kind of give me the elevator pitch as to the purpose of Intercoast College.
Yeah, well, Intercoast is not just alcohol and drug counseling. It is also for the trades, HVAC, the different trades, electrical, right? But as far as the alcohol and drug counseling training that you receive at Intercoast colleges, and the reason why that I've been there for over 20 years is that we support our students with an understanding of the challenges that our students are facing to go to college. Many of our students did not know that they had this opportunity. And so when they come to Intercoast, and this is a true story, we don't just give them the books and the instruction. We provide for them the support. Like, each student has a mentor that they're assigned to, career services that they're assigned to. There's individuals to walk the student from the first day of class, besides the instructors, all the way through to their internships and CCAP is a big part of Intercoast colleges. We've been working with Intercoast, PADAC back then, since we took over the alcohol and drug counseling program from CPTC, California Paramedical and Technical College. Intercoast took over that alcohol and drug counseling program. So we've had 20 years of perfecting and changing and continuing to make change, to make sure that our students are ready to go out and to work in this profession. Like we said to you in the beginning, the importance, it's not just the book knowledge that they get to learn, it's the internal knowledge that they get to learn, with people that really care about them, right?
Now, do you typically teach the same kind of courses, or do you vary it?
Well, I'm the director of the Alcohol and Drug Studies program. So we now have a bachelor's program. I was a big part of the committee that developed the bachelor's program. I was a big part of the committee that developed the associate's program. And I was a big part of the committee that started the certificate program. And as you know, Angie, the program that we have today doesn't look anything like the program of 10 years ago. The blessing about my relationships in the community, I am the past president of Katie, but my relationships in the community is just that I have firsthand knowledge of what's happening and the changes that are coming, not just the changes that are here, but the upcoming changes. And we're able to incorporate that into the curricula before it happens.
Well, you just led me right into my next question. Whenever I talk to someone who's been in the industry for a while, I always like to ask kind of what major changes have you seen? Have they been positive, negative, both?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we do at Intercoast College is test prep for the IC and RC exam, right? And I always tell the students at the test prep, I don't do the test prep, Evangelia does it, but I always tell the students at the test prep that it's old school meets new school. Right? And 10 years ago, we were abstinence-based, we were 12-step based. If you looked at the industry 10 years ago, they were still saying 12-step recovery, right? And today, through drug medical being what it is, we are a medical model today, right? So we have to accept harm reduction. We have to we have to appreciate, let me reiterate that. We have to appreciate harm reduction. We get to appreciate harm reduction. We get to appreciate motivational interviewing. We get to appreciate medication-assisted treatment. If you would have told a drug and alcohol, if you spoke of those words 10 years ago to a drug and alcohol counselor, you would have been faced with frustration, right? 10 years ago, we were all about abstinence-based 12-step community. You go to meetings or you're going to die. That's how I came into this field. And so as an educator and as a counselor, I had to unlearn a lot of what was embedded in me as far as my own recovery, right? The way that I did recovery. And please don't get me wrong, that I am so grateful that I have an abstinence-based recovery in my own personal life. But I was not faced with individuals that are challenged today with the potency of the drugs that they are taking today. Back in my day, right, you could crawl up on Nana's couch if you were a heroin addict and you could detox off of that heroin just to get your tolerance down so that you could get high again, right? That's not the case of the opioids that are on the street today, right? The potency of the opiates, the tolerance is so high with these individuals that they cannot crawl up on Nana's couch to detox. They need medical supervision in order to detox off of these drugs today. So we get to appreciate medication-assisted treatment today. We get to appreciate Vivitrol and anti-craving medications and all of the things that are coming to us and recognizing the importance of that in recovery.
Then kind of similar line, where do you see the industry going in the next 5-10 years? What kind of things do you see that are going to be happening? I know it's a crazy time nowadays, gestures at the world.
I can't even predict. I know that science, the evolution of science, the evolution of medication, I can't tell you where it's going to be, but I know that wherever it is, I will be there to support the newcomer. So who knows? They may invent, Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous says that, they haven't invented it yet, but who knows? They may be able to provide a person that can become a normal drinker. I don't know. I wouldn't test it because my life is so filled and happy today without alcohol and drugs. I don't have a need for them, but that's my personal journey.
Mm-hmm. Now, in your initial bio, it talked about where you've mentored and instructed hundreds of students. Let's talk a little bit about mentoring versus instructing. In your opinion, what does it take to be a good mentor?
Right. Well, my students are my students. When they graduate, I become their mentor, right? And so, that's another blessing about Intercoast College is just because you've graduated does not mean that, you don't have communication with us, right? And so, it's always, the students come back or they're ready to get certified. They're ready to do the test preps for yeah. So it's what the individual needs, and guiding them to, if I don't have the solution, I know a plethora of smart individuals that have the answers, right? And I have no shame in my game of picking up the phone and calling them and, saying, I don't, this situation here, what do you think? I don't have all the answers, that's for sure, and I never claimed to be the smartest person around, but I'm smart enough to make strong relationships in our community.
Mm-hmm. Now, what has been some of your biggest lessons learned since you've started working in the industry? The things that,
that I don't know everything. I know. That was, it's amazing how we trust our thinking process when we first come into recovery, and we will fight for that. Whatever it is, we are hell bent on being right. I've learned to just listen and evaluate, and not everything is all good or all bad or all knowing or all ignorant, right? There's lessons in everything, Angie, everything, right? And so I get to do that today. And I very rarely today do I come across an individual that I don't go, what can I learn from this person?
Mm-hmm. I can't remember who said it, but some famous philosopher said something along the lines of the smart person knows they know nothing. I think it's Socrates, if I'm not mistaken. But if I'm mistaken, audience, please let me know.
Well, they will. If they're anything like my students, I'll let you know.
Since we're in the advice section of the podcast interview, what is some of your advice for people who may want to start working with incarcerated individuals? What are some of your, things that you would tell them?
Education, because through that education, you're going to learn more about yourself. Through the process of learning about addiction and substance use disorder and, motivational interviewing. With motivational interviewing, it's not how to work with your clients, it's how to work with people, right? So you learn to communicate, right? You learn to communicate with yourself even, right? And the CBT and all of the spiritual principles, whether it's through philosophy or psychology or the 12 steps or religion, right? The spiritual principles is a process. And you don't get there by wishing to get there. You get there by learning, going out, making the mistakes, practicing, right? Readjusting, and then relearning the lesson. So patience with yourself and to know that it's okay not to know yet, right? It's a process, and to trust that, that stupid saying, trust the process, but find yourself solid individuals that will allow you to do you, right? In your own path, in your own journey, in a supportive nature. Yeah. So.
And then in a similar vein, what kind of advice would you give to someone who wanted to go into being an instructor or a mentor?
Yeah. And being an instructor it's a journey. And so, the process is you have to put on your instructor hat, not your recovery hat, not your, however, you have to know your own program, whatever you're instructing. You have to, I say there's no experts, but you have to master that program, right? And you don't just master it in the way that you did it. You master that program by the other experts and appreciating the other experts in your field, how they do it, right? And when I instruct, I don't just teach the way that I learned it. They don't do it that way anymore, right? So I certainly had to, as an instructor, I had to be flexible and willing to adjust the sails, so to speak, right? I was working with one of the Rock to Recovery individuals. And I said to him, the Rock to Recovery program that goes in and works with early recovery inside the treatment facilities, an amazing group of musicians. But I was working with one of the musicians and I says, well, practice makes perfect. And he goes, no, Judy, practice makes permanent, right? And he was saying how he was self-taught on the guitar and he learned how to play the guitar, but he learned how to play it wrong, right? And what it took for him to unlearn how he taught himself to play the guitar so that he could become a professional musician, right? So practice does not, you can practice something that doesn't make it you can learn it perfectly wrong, right? The many mistakes that I made along the way as a counselor and an instructor, some of those things that we had to go back, especially, those of us that have been around for forever, we had to go back and unlearn the way that we learned how to do. I walked into treatment and they were still dictating treatment and telling people what they needed to do. So we had to unlearn all of that in order to learn how we're doing treatment today. Yeah.
Now, what is your least favorite or hardest part of your job?
Today, because of the potency of the drugs, excuse me, I'm going to get emotional, the deaths that and I'll see the potential of these beautiful young, and I have so much hope and then they'll go out and use one last time. And Angie, that's what we face today. And that's what individuals in early counseling that are working in this field is the death. Yeah. And I remember when it was like 50,000 overdoses, well, now it's 130. Yeah. And California is the only state that's not declining. Yeah.
Now, on a little bit of a lighter note, what is your favorite / easiest part of your job?
Yeah. The easiest part of my job is I love my job. Yeah. I love my job. I love, there isn't a part of my job that, it keeps me young and invigorated. And there isn't a part, there's just so much to continue to learn and the people that I get to speak with. And I don't have a part of my job that I don't love, right? Except for the hours. I'll find myself, going on 14, 15 hours in a day. Like I got myself an Australian cattle dog just so I'd have to walk it, to make sure that I have self-care and exercise because I get in a zone when it comes to what we do.
Now, still kind of in the advice category, your bio talked about how, you bring insight into what it takes to create meaningful, lasting change in individuals and communities alike. In a weird way, what does that mean? I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah, slowly, right? And painfully sometimes. Yeah, I always like it when somebody comes to me and they got this big smile and I'm changed, I'm going through the process of change. And I look and I'm going, because the process of change, you don't have a big old smile on your face. And even today, when I'm back to life's lessons and I am going through the process of understanding and change, it's always on a challenge, right? And so being prepared for our society is about instant gratification and painless and everything, not like you're not supposed to feel pain. Well, yes, you are. Change is painful. It's challenging. The euphoria of it is that after you have a lasting change, you get to look back on that and go, thank God for that. Thank God for that situation. Thank God, for my misunderstanding so that I could learn to understand it. Right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if change was easy, everybody would be doing it.
Well, if education was easy, everyone would be doing it. Yeah. And that's another thing that I encourage our students is that what's the percentage of people that get higher education, and why, and challenging themselves as to, so often when it comes to a formal higher education, people don't want to invest in themselves, right? And spend money on a car or something that's going to depreciate immediately instead of investing in themselves. It's not just, what they're going to do with their careers, but the investment in themselves is their lifestyle and the changes that they get to enjoy in life.
Mm-hmm. Now we're getting close to the end. I always like to ask kind of knee-jerk reaction when all is said and done. Why do you do it? Why do you do what you do?
Yeah. You know what, Angie, I think that the spirit in me would not allow me to do anything else, right? Even, those times how many times as a counselor, you go into the bathroom and cry and say, I quit. I'm never going to do this, and, that spirit inspired inspiration that hits you and you have a knowing as to why you're doing this, right? And and it's just the blessing behind it. Now, I don't mean to sound like I've arrived in any way, but I have an understanding that for today, right? I am exactly where I need to be, doing exactly what I need to be doing. And when I don't do that, when I feel envious and jealous or insecure over a situation or a person in my life, that's time for me to look at that and go, now what's going on with you, Judy? Because it's never about the person that I'm feeling, like I'd like to blame them. Yeah. But it's never about that person. Yeah. And as well as anybody, that our community gives us a lot of opportunity to look at ourselves in our knee-jerk reaction too.
You bring up a good point. I've asked a couple other people, being a counselor is a very emotional job. I'm sure working with incarcerated individuals is even more emotional. What do you kind of do to kind of keep away from compassion fatigue, to make it fresh, to make yourself, still, I guess, enjoy the job in the way?
Yeah. Well, what people don't understand is this: you have a perception of going into the prisons and what it's like. You don't realize that these gentlemen, the sacrifices that they made, or these women and gentlemen, the sacrifices that they make to be in that OMCP program, right? So it takes very special men and women to be vetted to be in that program. So it's almost as if I'm learning more from them than they are from me, right? So it's not a challenge that I'm walking in there. I mean, what these individuals face on a daily basis, to be able to sit in those chairs and learn, and you're just like in awe of them, right? I mean, some of them are just my heroes, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the life, the challenges that they have faced in life, the challenges that they continue to face, and what they are doing for the betterment of their brothers and sisters inside the walls because they care. How much more spiritual human being can you get than that? So I feel, I just feel honored and blessed when I have that opportunity. And I feel honored and blessed when the incarcerated individuals come to our school, right? Because many of them come out, and the challenge is they don't know how a computer works. They don't know how the phone works. They don't know all of these challenges that they're faced with, and that, they get to come to us and we get to guide them step by step, so that, we are very user friendly because we love them. We want them to have every opportunity that they can possibly have, and every understanding that, yes, you're going to face challenges, but you're not facing them alone.
Now, like I said, we're getting close to the end. I always like, since, obviously the industry is constantly evolving, constantly changing. You yourself have, we've talked about how it's changed drastically since you first started. What kind of resources do you use on a regular basis to kind of keep yourself updated, what's going on, to keep yourself involved in the industry?
Well, I'm very involved in the resources, our accreditation community, CADAP, CCAP, Katie, very much involved, and because they have their pulse on the legislation and what's happening. I really appreciate CCAPs, because that's where I hear what's coming, what the bills that are going to be introduced and the bills that have passed and the bill, and the whole educational process behind the importance of understanding legislation, right? because despite our best intentions, we have to play their game, or whatever their game is, right? Whatever their laws are, right? And so, many of us have these wonderful ideas as how we would do it, but that isn't how the funding sources are happening. And that's not how the men that are incarcerated, there's different laws that if you were incarcerated under the age of 25, you can go up for, so knowing this, the importance of knowing this, and knowing that it's coming, and that, people are, people need to know, right? People need to know the importance of voting. People need to know the importance. Look at how much change we've had since the new administration. That already changes are being a process before us. So.
Mm-hmm.
Educational changes and, in our community. So.
Exactly. This is a perfect opportunity for me to plug the fact that NBHAP also has an advocacy section. We primarily focus on national, since we're a national organization, although we do occasional state-based ones when we find them. But we do send out advocacy alerts on Thursdays, not every week. It just depends on when we have it. And then our members get access to our advocate, Andrew Guestluke, who was also a guest on the podcast earlier, on a regular basis. So if you have specific questions, you can reach out to us and we can pass them along. So we're now towards the end, believe it or not. We've been doing this for a little over 40 minutes now. What was there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't, or that you thought I was going to ask, but I did?
No, just the importance of education, right? If you want to work in this field, and continuing your education. And I can be reached at judy.redman@intercoast.edu.
A Y for those who are listening. Is there any other ways that they can, are you on social media or anything like that?
You know what? Ever since COVID, I slipped back out of it was such a heartbreak that I'm on social media, but I don't use it these days. But my phone number is, I don't want to see it on any bathroom walls now. No, although I'd probably respond. Anyway, my phone number is 909-767-7335. And I've had that same number for almost 20 years, so it's not going to change. Just going with me. Yeah. Judy.Redman@intercoast.edu.
Well, you've been listening to Destination Change. Our guest today was Judy Redman. Thank you for being here. Our theme song is Sun Nation by Keepsa and used via a Creative Commons license by the Free Music Archive. Please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on Apple Podcasts so we can get more listeners. In the meantime, you can always see more about the podcast, including show notes and where else to listen, on our website, www.nbhap.org. If you have questions for the podcast, please email us at info@nbhap.org. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Auntie.